Hey, we're back with another episode of Get This, the show about things people love. And I'm here with author Brianna da Silva. Brianna, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. And you're a return guest to the show. I believe the last time we spoke, it must have been last year, in the before time.
Yeah, sometime last year. I don't remember
Right.
exactly when.
Right. Yeah. It is now August of 2021. The world is still completely insane. And this is, of course, an interview podcast about things people love. I'm Kevin Kautzman. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. Brianna, where in the world are you?
I'm in Denver, Colorado, so I'm in
That's
the
right.
same place where I was before. Yeah, still
Okay.
still by the mountains, more or less.
All right, cool. And of course, again, this is the show about things people love. So, what is it that you're excited about that you want to share on this show? I understand you have a book coming out. The last time we spoke, you were working on this novel, so I think we're going to get an update about that. And I want to kind of sort of pick your brain about it. But what's the angle today? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, I was thinking we could talk about mythology or I guess some people might have to be careful because some people might not be comfortable with me unequivocally putting these categories together. But I would say mythology and religion because a lot of my research in that has also like informed my world building. The last time we were talking about
Right.
languages,
I
so
like
similar.
this phrase, world building.
Yeah,
It evokes genre fiction a lot of the time, but
yeah,
every author does this, whether they're projecting a real world artifice. This is something I've been thinking about lately in my own work, in my own writing in the theater, is this idea that I have about quote unquote realism and how it's kind of an absurd thing to even say, well, this is realism. This is how people talk. It's like, well, no, you're throwing actors a bunch of lines and putting them on stage. There's nothing about this that is realism. It can't even be. The whole thing is artificial. So yeah, that's my own little tangent. But
Oh, that's so true though, because like people don't think about it, but no matter what genre you're writing, you always have to world build because every story has its own rules that it's going to follow and its own character web and setting. And so you have to decide like if your story is set in a coffee shop, what is this coffee shop like? Who works there? What's the vibe? Like all that matters for the story. So world building is something that is you need to do in every genre, I would say, just in different ways.
yeah, so you're thinking a lot about world building and mythology and religion, and as these things pertain to your work writing your novel, which comes out in September. Am I right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's coming out real soon. I guess
Uh-huh.
like 3 weeks from now.
Plug it. What's it called? Where's it going to be? Might as well just do it. Just get it
Sure.
out of the
Wait,
way.
I can show a picture of it. This isn't like the final
Hey,
copy, but
wow,
this is what it looks like.
that looks very cool. City of Reckoning. That's a very
Mhm.
cool cover.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, City of Reckoning. It is a dark epic fantasy about a group of young people who get caught up in a war and begin to wonder if they're fighting for the wrong side. And it has a lot of things around like revolution and freedom and also trauma and revenge and things like that. So yeah,
Nothing pertinent to our current situation here in the United States of America.
never.
No,
Why would
totally
anyone
drawn
ever
out of
write?
thin air. We're living in a golden age. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And the cover looks fantastic. You must have worked with an artist to design that?
I hired the team at designforwriters.com and I
Okay.
recommend them. They're really great. They're
There's a
based
plug.
in the UK.
All right.
But yeah, it's like just a two-man shop of two people, I think that run it all. But yeah, very,
Book
very great.
design and cover design and everything, it really is an art. It's an art form. And
Yeah.
we used to say, oh, don't judge a book by its cover. And it's completely insane, of course, because everyone does and everyone will. It's,
Well,
you know.
yeah, I mean, a cover is one of the most important marketing pieces of a book. It's going to tell you what kind of book it is and what genre it is and whether it's the kind of thing you want to read. So it's important to get it right.
Well, for the people who are not watching this episode of Get This on YouTube, we're on the website at getthispodcast.com. I got to get my own plug in. Let's describe the cover. How would you describe it? So, I mean, if you put it
Oh
up
yeah.
again, yeah.
So it's like, let's see, it's like you've got this big old Batwing on one side. It's like an illustrated cover, very painterly and kind of not very detailed illustrations. So it's very stylistic. And in the background, you've got just a bunch of like fire and flames everywhere. It's a very like angry looking cover. But then got a little silhouette of
Uh-huh.
a girl with a bow and arrow with a
All
bow.
right. Okay.
Yeah,
Do your
an
characters?
archer.
I'm into archery. So, do your characters do archery?
Yeah, archery isn't like a huge part of the story, but there are two characters who are archers. Um, yeah,
Cool.
funny enough, the one that uses archery more in the book is not the one that silhouette is. It's a different girl.
Uh-huh. All right.
But yeah,
Okay. Well, and what was that process like having it designed? Did you have many iterations, or did they hit a home run right away?
they pretty much hit a hit. Wow, they pretty much hit a home run right away. I had like a bunch of, I mean, there was a big process at the beginning of like, going through what the cover needed to accomplish and what the feel was and all this stuff. And they sent me two different options. And then that was the one that I chose. I like showed it to a bunch of people. I was like, which out of these two covers would you pick up at at the store or
A
whatever?
little A/B testing there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and literally every single person chose that cover. So I was like, okay, so that's the one. And then I like had them do some variations. I was like, can you do this or this? And then no matter what they did, I always was like, actually, just keep it as it was. The
Mm.
first version was perfect.
I'm sure
Ended
they
up
love
staying.
that. Yeah, people
Yeah,
love that. No, they sound like a great team, and the end product looks very cool. Can I see the back of it real quick, just for kicks?
yeah. I
Did you get
can't show
some
you the spine.
blurbs?
The I'm still getting some, but I have one right now.
Okay.
It's not on here. It's
Uh-huh.
but yeah, this is just like the
Right.
regular back copy.
Okay.
Um
Yeah,
but
just looks fabulous. How many pages is it? It looks like it might be 350, 400 pages.
oh, it's huge. It's
What?
closer to 800. It's very
What?
big. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
big book. This
What?
is this is a brick. So this is like
Wow.
this is a big adventure if you want a really big adventure. If you want to just quick fast read, this isn't going to be your kind of book.
Where
I mean,
can
it's going to be
people, yeah,
fast,
where are
but
people going to be able to find it?
it will be online anywhere. As I speak right now, the ebook is everywhere. The the print pre-order has taken forever. It should be up any day now. But it probably won't be like in stores, but if you'll be able to go to any store and request it. So
Uh-huh. Great.
when that's
Okay.
yeah.
Now, I'm just going to ask the sort of basic interview questions, I guess, and
Yeah.
we'll go deeper as we go. But these are the things that really genuinely pop into my mind. I don't have like
Yeah.
some list of questions, but I would
Do
ask
what you want.
anybody, how long have you been working on it?
It took 7 years.
This is why I love being a playwright, because I can write an entire play in 3 weeks. And when I talk to novelists, my brain I just can't imagine. 7 years. Okay. All right.
Well,
So,
part of the reason why it took so long was because I was still learning how to like write a novel, because this is my first published novel, right? Like I'd written novels before, they were all bad. As it goes, you always have to like write
oh
a
yeah.
lot. If anyone
Oh
is
yeah.
learning how to write a novel, just everyone says this, but it's eternal truth. Your first novel is not going to get published. Just accept that. Probably not your third either. But yeah, and so there was a lot of like just learning process over that, and I ended up completely rewriting it once, sort of twice. But yeah, and I didn't really that there's a lot of reasons why that happened, but I've learned a lot since then about having a better plan, because a lot of the problems with why I had to rewrite it one time was because there were just so many structural issues with the story that I had to
Hmm.
fix.
Yeah.
So the plan is, when I write book 2, I will not take 7 years. Because as right now, I was doing this morning actually, and working on I'm trying to get a lot better at outlining, because the better an outline you have beforehand, the less fixing you have to do later. So if I can get the
Without a
story
doubt.
down the first time, then you're just editing. You're not rewriting.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. How many books are there going to be in this world that you've built?
So in the world, so in this, I'll answer first by saying, in this particular story, there's just 2. So, and if you just read the first one, you'll be content. It's a full story.
Only 2 800-page books. No,
Right.
no big deal.
Yeah, but it is part of a duology. So there will be, if you like the characters and all that, and you want to find out what happens later and the implications to things that happen in this book. There is a sequel that I'm working on now, but then I will write. So I'm planning a total of 4 duologies like that are all in this world, that are all standalones in a sense. Like you could read just one of those duologies without reading the others. But if you do end up reading them all, it's going to be like a much bigger, more epic story. So that's the plan. It's going to take a while.
Great. Okay. Well, it's been nice knowing you. And
Yeah.
how do you typically work? What is your process? I mean, quite literally, physically. Do you have a dedicated place for your writing? Do you do it every day? What does that look like?
I don't do it every day, though that's always the ideal I'm striving towards, but life is life, so you can't always have your ideal. But I write mostly in the mornings, like early morning. And when it comes to like the process for writing an individual scene, I do it in like 2 stages. So I mean, after I know what's happening, so I have like the outline, then I do what I call the vomit draft. So I literally just am like plopping everything down, like, okay, then this person says that and this, and I don't have to think about sentences. I'm just figuring out what happens, and then I come back to it, and then I actually write it.
I love the vomit draft personally. It's so good.
You do the same thing?
Oh, sort of. Again, it's different for the playwriting because you don't have to construct sentences and paragraphs quite so much. It's a little more, maybe a little more. It's all spoken. It's all dialogue, pretty much. So it's a different animal. But yeah, the metaphor I've always used is that if you're a sculptor, you don't, and somebody who's commissioned a statue that's 5'8", you don't start with a piece of stone that's 5'8". You start with a piece of stone that's 7 feet tall, and then you chisel down and you shape it. So that first draft, yeah, write a 160-page play and then cut it to 90 pages or cut it to 100 pages. So yes, vomit draft. Just get it out, get it out, get it out. Don't worry if there's exposition. Don't worry if it's not tight, because you're going to have time to do it. Yeah. Hemingway, right? Write drunk, edit sober.
That's a great quote.
Yeah. And you don't actually have to be drunk, but you can write with that kind of ecstatic purge. I'm going to get this on the page and I'm going to have it. Yeah. That's interesting. So what's preventing you from writing every day? Is it daily, like work obligations, or? Honestly,
the problem is that sometimes, I don't go to bed early enough, and so then I don't wake up early enough. But it's literally just that simple. It's like, there's just, whatever. I'm hanging out one night with people or something, and then I can't get up the next morning. It's just basic stuff like that.
Discipline.
Living life.
Discipline. Yeah, you got to live that life too. You can't.
Right.
In a sense, that is all writing. You don't want to be somebody who just ends up writing about writers writing.
Yeah, so it's boring.
You have to go and live a life. I mean, we were going to go to the gym this morning, but I got sucked in. I watched Jaws 2, and then we were like, it was quite late, and our son was asleep. And it's kind of, when you're a parent, I don't think you have kids, do you?
No, yeah, I'm not a parent yet.
One thing about having kids is that when they go to bed, and if they're sleeping for 4 or 5 hours at a stretch, suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to watch Jaws 3 now, which is a terrible movie, but we put it on and it was just wonderful just to watch this cheesy, awful 80s movie. Anyway, so I understand that, like, yeah, it's tough. And I was going to work on something last night myself too. And it's just like, no, last night was just a night to watch dumb movies. Well, so, okay. 7 years working on this novel, you're releasing it next month. You have this, is that, you said that's not the actual book that you have. You're gonna have proof copies coming, or author copies?
Yeah, this right here is the spine is where it's no longer the actual design. It says draft 6. Draft 7 is the one people are gonna read.
Okay,
so
all right.
I've got all these like notes of things I was editing in this one, but yeah, I have those files up, and then I'm gonna get a copy of that soon. So
have you been working with a professional editor?
Yes, I actually used 2 different editors at different points. So I had a developmental editor years ago. That was before the first rewrite. And that was just like getting some input on the general structure of the story and stuff like that. And then I used later on, I used a line editor. Although she kind of did a hybrid. She kind of did like line editing and like, I don't know what the term would be, because it was like she was giving feedback on like some pacing stuff on like a chapter by chapter level too, but also on a sentence by sentence level. So it was like kind of a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had a person mentoring you through this process? Are you in a chat group? How are you navigating it? There's a lot. People don't understand how much goes into the production of a book. They don't.
Yeah. No, I don't have a mentor though. That would be cool. I mainly just have a lot of friends and like random acquaintances online. So I know a lot of writers. So I get a lot of input and advice and learn things from people that way, I would say. Kind of osmosis, or just learning from each other constantly.
Well,
I have a fair number of like self-published writers too, like as a mix, just a mix of different people that are published in different ways. So
there is so much more of that going on, and the internet really makes the barrier of entry low. You just have to build that audience. You got to get that audience, and to do that, sometimes you have to have the product too. We think about this a lot. And I talk with my buddy Brad, who I do this other podcast with, artofdarkpod.com. And yeah, we talk about this a lot. We think about like audience building and how do you get people engaged, and there's so much noise now, but if you can cut through it and break through, the opportunity is just incredible. I want to ask, what happened 7 years ago, 8 years ago, where you said, I'm going to write this. Did the idea just come to you and you go, I'm going to write an 800-page epic? Is it fair to call it fantasy, or sort of like fantasy novel called City of Reckoning? All at once, it just downloaded. You were Neo, and now you knew Kung Fu, or was it like slowly? How did that happen?
Most of the story ideas I can like think about moments like that, or it's usually actually a fusion of like two different story concepts or ideas that come together. And I'm like, oh, that could make a story. With this one, I don't remember because it was so long ago. It was just like a slow evolution of various things. I was just like, at that point, I had just kind of always been world building for like years and thinking about stories in this world that I was thinking about. And then at some point, several different ideas kind of coalesced and became one. And but then it changed so many times. So it was like the original story evolved, and then finally, when I was finally going to write it, it was something very different. And then that was even very different from what is actually being published now. So yeah, it was just a slow evolution.
You know what I'm hearing, and what it's making me think of is sort of this idea that there's like a dialectic that the artist goes through in our own minds, where you go, well, I want to write something like this, but I have an idea to do that. And I had this just recently with something I'm working on, where I go, oh, they're the same idea. I just have to combine these two things, and they're kind of incongruent. Like you wouldn't think this would be that, but if I bring them together, that's so interesting. You wouldn't think that the two things would go together. Like my new play, the way I'm pitching it is, and this isn't about me, but the way I'm pitching it is, it's like Dr. Dolittle meets Fargo. Which, I'm not really going to pitch it that way because that sounds sort of crazy. But when you see it, you'll know it's like, it's got vengeance and crypto and opioids and Minneapolis, and it's all going to be in there. And this is the thing that I was putting off last night when I was watching Jaws 3. Nice. So, I mean, when you first started, did you just start sketching what you were going to work on? I mean, like how did it even look? Did you get a notebook? Did you look like a crazy person on the subway, or just Post-it notes? And
it's kind of easier for me to answer that question on projects that I'm working on now, because I'm so much more systematic now than I was back then. But like what I do now, I mentioned I have those different stories that I'm going to write in this universe, but I have other stories too. I'm always working on stuff, but I use Evernote. I don't know if you're familiar with the application.
I've heard of it.
It's really good. But I can use it on multiple devices. But anytime I have any sort of an idea or something that's going to add, like, oh, that one scene, I should do blah, 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 or whatever. Or even it's just that, that moment like you were describing when you think about two different things that come together, you're like, oh, that can be one story. Anything at all. I'm just putting it in there and just kind of dumping it. And then when it's time to actually work on a project, then I just get really organized. So that I go through all my notes, make some, some real outlines and things like that. And I'll get a Scrivener document. Scrivener is what I use to write in, and then, start making out the chapters and all that stuff. And yeah.
I want to shift gears to the main focus of mythology and religion, but I have one additional question about the novel. First, if you were trying to sell this to studio executives for the rights, or to somebody who wants to pick the book up, why this book? What are some comparable things? If you like these things, you might like this novel.
I don't know if this would work as well for studio heads, because I'll have to think about like what the cinema equivalents are. But what I've been saying is that if you enjoy, these are two different fantasy books that have come out recently, but if you enjoy stories that like sort of female-led stories that deal with empire and revolution, like The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, and if you enjoy sort of grand sweeping world building and things like that, like The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, then you will like City of Reckoning. Has sort of the vibes of those two different books. But
you really have that down. That's great. I'm sold. I don't know what any of those things are, but I have a sense. I don't know that I'm the target demo per se, and no offense, but
no,
I would certainly read it. And I hope I can find you. Maybe send me a PDF or something, or I can buy a copy when it comes out. Are you doing and then we'll switch to the myth and everything. But that's great. You really nailed that, because it's important to know that stuff. I think some people just go, it's just my own thing, and it's like no. It's like you got to cut through the chase, or cut through the noise and just cut to the chase and tell people this is da da da.
Well, this is why I'm self-publishing it, because I enjoy that kind of stuff. I enjoy thinking about marketing. I don't know that I've done an incredibly good job at this point, but I've learned a lot of lessons. But I enjoy it. I really enjoy marketing. So yeah, I've thought about this a lot.
Are you building a website for it? Is there going to be a website? Oh, cool. Where's that going to be?
It will be Neurasia.com.
Neurasia.com. Because you're creating, the last podcast we talked about this, you invented a language.
Two. So
okay, all right.
But
how do you spell Neurasia?
Here, I'll put it. It's on the back of the thing.
Okay,
it's right there. But it's I don't know if this is showing up backwards.
NERASIA.com. NER. Okay, got it.
Neurasia. It's like it's pronounced like Eurasia with an N, but it's spelled like Asia, but then with NER at the beginning.
NER in the front. NER Asia. Okay. And is that the world? What is that?
It's the continent where these stories take place.
I see. Okay.
And that continent is on a moon surrounding a ringed planet. So
wow. Okay. Trippy.
The moon is not named. I have not given it a name. It's interesting.
Interesting. All right. Well, yeah. And so in the last episode, we were talking about the languages and the world building and all of this. So you mentioned at the top of this episode, mythology and religion and how that all ties into your world building. Let's go into that. What has that been like? I know personally when I was younger and when I was just first starting to write, I could feel that almost like sort of ecstatic creator joy at realizing that in front of the blank page, there is a quality of I don't mean this in any blasphemous way, but there is a kind of a godlike quality. I think it actually drives certain writers mad. But if you can wrestle with that, it's very, very rewarding. This is my own, I'm just spouting off here, but tell me what is mythology and religion, and in the real world, what does that all mean to you in terms of as it relates to the world that you built here in this novel?
There are basically two aspects to this. So the first aspect is that of like creating mythology or writing with a mythical mindset, I guess, which is very relevant for like big epic stories. So what I mean by that is like, okay, so a lot of, pretty much every single human culture, especially the major ones, but as far as I'm aware, like every single major culture has had its epics that sort of define they define the values of the people. They kind of will express, a sense of like belonging. Like a lot of epics will talk about like, our origins came from this god or whatever, or there'll be some sort of a connection between those epics and those myths, and then how you're supposed to behave in the here and now. And they'll tell you a lot of like social things too. So, what makes a hero, what makes a villain. This is how to behave. This is how not to behave. That's what I've seen in a lot of the epics that I've read. I have this goal of reading all the major world epics. I'm not there, not close yet, but yeah. And so I think most of the epics that really like define a culture, they always kind of come really organically, right? Like they're the ones that people enjoy the most, and they rise to the top. My theory on America's epic, their main epic at the moment, I would say, is the Marvel universe.
Sure.
A lot of people don't think about it that way, but that's really what it is. I mean, it has the same structure as a lot of these like old epics, in the sense that it's very long. There's a lot of characters, and it tells you about, what it means to be a hero.
Right. And it probably is, in terms of sheer numbers, the most popular. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how I would mark that. What is the epic of a single culture? It's what is the one that's popular, because that's the one that's resonating with people. But yeah. And so I like thinking about the sort of like, how would you put it? The sort of legacy of epic storytelling in the stories that I'm writing, and try to take some of those lessons that I'm finding from like, classic epics and things like that, in order to try to make a story that resonates on that kind of really deep psychological level. So that's like one aspect about this, like thinking in terms of writing as if you're kind of writing a myth, because there's a lot of like symbolism and things like that. Although I think it's important to not like overdo that, because you can sort of like, it has to kind of come from your own like wellspring of like your own psyche in a sense too. Like if you try to like, like there's definitely principles that you can apply, but you can kill it, if you. Yeah.
There is kind of a grammar of mythology.
Right.
You have Joseph Campbell, you have Jung, you have Eliade, and you can, as a storyteller, you can do kind of a buffet style thing. I think Star Wars, the original trilogy, was such a great example of something which had this incredible mystical arc. And of course, it's all woo-woo, and there's really no there. But with the music and the vibe, it's a vibe. The Force is a vibe. Right? You don't want to overthink it too much, It's like, no,
that's a good point.
But yeah. So was there a phase in your writing where you focused wholly on this kind of arena? Like I'm thinking about Tolkien and the Silmarillion and all of that sort of origin story background, or did it sort of emerge from the process of writing the novel itself?
Not sure I understand the question. Can you say another way?
When you were building the mythos, the cosmology of the world, did you devote time specifically to that, or did it kind of emerge from the writing of the story?
I think to answer that, I will go into that other aspect that I was going to talk about related to myths. And that is myths so there's just the aspect of like thinking about the story itself as a myth. But then there's also, if you're creating a world, it will have its own myths. And so that becomes an aspect of world building too, which has been another thing that I've had a lot of fun building out, is like thinking about, okay, there are all these different cultures in this world. What do they believe about their origins? How do what they believe varies? And what do these stories tell you about their perspective and about their values? And so one of the things that I did in this book is, in the different sections, they each start with a different myth, with a different story of the world itself. And these different stories are telling you what these different cultures value in terms of what's relatable, what is relevant to the story itself. So there are these people in the world of Neurasia called aberrants, which it's kind of like chimera. Like they have like, they're people, they have like animal parts, like there's winged people. Oh, wow, you have a wing on the cover, you know, and there's like horned people, stuff like that. And some people see the aberrants as just normal. Some of them think of them as like gods, the people that you're supposed to respect, and others see them as very dangerous and that they need to be persecuted and oppressed and whatnot. And so these different stories will tell you about that. But yeah, to answer that question, yes, that is something that I've spent time on. And that's a lot of fun because it's less about like the style of this particular fantasy. It's not a super, it's not high fantasy. Like there isn't like a lot of magic in this world. It's just a lot more like real feeling and more like gritty and in your face kind of a style of writing for this one. So most of that mythos is, well, is it true? Is it not? It's kind of in that sense of like, this is what the people here believe about the origins. I'm not going to say whether or not it's true or not, but
right, a little bit of a postmodern thing. What is real? What is true? All
or
of
at least
that.
I'm leaving it open so that readers can draw their own conclusions, I suppose.
Yeah, that's always the best way. When you were working on this, and as it pertains to the myth and everything, did you ever find yourself sort of delusionally inhabiting the world as you were writing? You would go walk around. I mean, is that an experience you've ever had? Like, I guess, what does it feel like after a long day of writing this and a breakthrough? Has it ever gotten weird?
Yes. I think I know what you're asking, and the answer is yes. Yeah, it's hard to get out of it.
Right. I think there are lots of things open up to me when I think of that question and the answer to that question. Weird things can happen when you start writing, where the world starts to reflect back something that's going on in your own mind, and you start seeing the world differently. It's like you're sort of reprogramming your own mind as you're working on something. I've never written anything 800 pages long, so I can only imagine. It requires a kind of obsessiveness that most people, I don't think, will ever quite experience. I think it's a bit of an outlier pursuit to write an 800-page novel.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I'm very much like I definitely have that like obsessive tendency to me. Like when I'm very interested in something, if I want to learn about something or I want to do something, I want to go and like do it thoroughly and fully. And if I'm not willing to like commit that hard, I'm not really interested in it. I'm like in or out. It's like, that's just my personality, I guess.
Well, so you have in this novel mythology that begins every chapter.
Every section. So there's
every
like
section.
5 stories.
Okay, right. Okay, like great. And does it play in with the plot? Is it integral to the plot? This ideology that these various groups have, it's central to the plot? You're nodding. Okay.
Yeah, or at least, at the very least, it's giving you some context that helps you further understand some of the characters' actions, because it's showing you what their culture believes, and it's also contrasting. So like there are 3 major stories in there that tell a very different narrative about the aberrants, right? So there's a cohesion to the stories. They're all about a similar thing, but they express very different values and very different perspectives of these different cultures.
You've been reading world sagas. Tell me about that. What have you been reading? I'm trying to think. Gilgamesh and the Icelandic one, and I can't name the Icelandic one. It sounds like I can't even.
Oh, there's a whole bunch of those.
Yeah,
I have not read Gilgamesh yet. That's like one of the biggest ones, and I need to. That's probably next on my list.
It's hard to find these in good translations too. A lot of times the translations are like, what is this? Yeah.
So I read like the summary of it, but I do want to sit and like actually read it. But the biggest one that was really influential on me last year was the Ramayana of Hindu mythology, and that kickstarted my because at that point I was trying to read a bunch of epics, and I was trying to read a bunch of mythology, and then that was what kind of got me interested in the religion angle too, because you can't really study Hindu mythology without studying Hinduism, the religion, and like seeing how all these, seeing how the myths and the epics integrate with the religious values of a culture too, was what kind of drew my interest there, and that's been helping me do a better job at creating those two. because I grew up like evangelical Christian, and years ago I was very religiously illiterate. I was just basically familiar with my own religion, and that was like all I knew. And I remember a while ago, my dad was pointing out that I was using a lot of like Christianese in my fiction, in my attempt to like create religions like in the story. He was like, this feels like
Sure.
Christianity. I'm like, no, it isn't, because I didn't really understand like how different religions can vary and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
so, and more recently I've been, getting a lot better about that. And I think that's made my world building much better as a result too.
Right. Interesting. When you say evangelical, how hardcore are we talking here? Was it, are you sort of passing out chick tracts at the mall, or was it?
Pretty, I would say almost to that level. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think I thought of myself as being more evangelical than I was, in the sense that like I didn't really evangelize very much, but I just felt guilty about it all the time that I wasn't evangelizing more. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And how do you find that
Mm.
experience growing up as a Protestant Christian in
Yeah.
America? You've already touched on it a little bit, but was there a time where you really broke through and you said, I mean, how long have you been looking at other religions? I know there can be a barrier for people if
Mm.
you grow up in a very devout kind of serious family of even like reading reading Buddhism or reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It
like
was something
breaking
that
out a
was
little. Hmm.
it was seen as kind of weird, like learning about other religions. There was almost like this like creepy aspect that like, oh, like that's going to be like demonic or something. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
just really
Hmm.
weird, like
Oh,
prejudice
totally.
against, especially the more mystical the religion, that was going to somehow be like you were going to get invaded by demons or something if you
Yeah,
studied it. And
there are
so,
people on the Bird website who are like, yoga is satanic, and it's like, okay,
yes,
whoa, whoa, whoa,
yes,
slow
that
down
was
here.
that was definitely, I definitely used to hear things like that, and which is such a shame, because I feel like now some of the myths and things that I enjoy the most come from some of those more mystical type styles. Like right now I'm studying like European paganism, especially like the Celtic traditions, and I love it. It's so like the sort of whimsical nature of it, and the sort of like, the sense of like the fairies that are under the ground, and that are gonna play tricks on you. And
Hmm.
it's like, it's such a fun world to explore, and it's such a shame that I used to think of it as like creepy, because it's not. It's a little bit weird, but it's weird in like a really cool way. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that is interesting. There's a very fine film that you might appreciate that I
Oh,
really like. It's a documentary called American Mystic,
oh, okay,
and it focuses on three subjects. One is a Lakota man who's going to do a young man who's going to go do the Sundance,
okay.
which it's quite intense. It's where they have a tree, and the men do this each year, and it's like a repentance ritual.
Mm,
They take buffalo splints, like bone from the shins of the buffalo, and they whittle them into like little daggers, and they jab them into their chests or their back, and they hoist themselves up to the sky and like repent for their wrongdoings. This, it's called the Sundance. It's where Sundance comes from.
wow.
So they focus on him, and then they focus on a neo-pagan in California who's a witch, and she's doing fairy magic and all of this stuff, and she's totally wild. And then there's a spiritualist, this black fellow out in
Mm.
upstate New York, who is into like laying on hands and everything. And it's just this lovely little sly documentary about kind of these fringe religious people, although I would hesitate to call the Native American fringe in America, but
Yeah,
nevertheless, minority religious practices in the United States, or
I'm
in
gonna
North
write this
America.
down, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would like to see that.
yeah. I mean, and the
Write
only
it
reason
down.
I hold forth like that is because I think it really is in line with the subject of what we're discussing. Christianity has a fantastic, and if you watch it, let me know what you think of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the secret of that documentary is that she's making the case that film is its own kind of mystic practice. So
Ah,
you watch the film and you begin to go, oh, she's showing you too that there's mysticism in the very act of filmmaking, which I love.
I love that.
And
I
it's
love
never.
thinking about,
Mhm.
one of my favorite films on that theme is Hugo. Did you see Hugo?
Uh, no, but wasn't that Scorsese?
Her.
Am I
I don't remember.
confused? I think it might be. Yeah, go on though.
This it's the one with the little boy who lives in the big clock.
Yeah, it's
Um,
Scorsese did that movie. Yeah, I need
oh
to
yeah,
see
yeah.
that. I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, and it's basically like because they're talking about the history of film in that movie and how closely aligned it is with the history of magic about like how it was these magicians that then became filmmakers, and it just plays this theme throughout the whole thing where the whole movie is just it's like you're watching a magic trick and you're I don't know it's
I love stuff like that. I need to watch that. And that's no joke. When you go to, if you're ever in upstate New York, you're ever in Rochester, you want to go see the Kodak Museum
mm,
because, and if I may, in American Mystic, the spiritualist goes up to this community in upstate New York that's 30, 45 minutes outside of Rochester. There used to be a train line between Rochester and this place, and this place is still famous for having a like a little quaint little main street, and it's the palmist, the person who does the palmistry, and then it's the tarot reader, and then it's the fortune teller, and they have this little community there. And it's easy to forget that the early history of photography was really indelibly tied up with occultism. And what is the saying? Any advanced technology
uh,
is indistinguishable from magic. I can't remember who said that, but
I can't read it either.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But that I mean, I love that stuff. So yeah, and you forget too that upstate New York, that was like Silicon Valley of its day. Photography
Mm,
was a sea change in thinking.
mm,
The other thing I wanted to talk about or ask you about sort of
yeah.
is Christian mysticism. There's an awful
Mm,
lot of mystic tradition. I'm a Catholic and I was raised Catholic, so I'm sort of as close to a pagan as you can get as a Christian, famously.
yeah.
And I never understood how Protestants look at us, but I'm slowly
Mhm.
starting to begin to understand. Like, and I think it's great. It's just sort of like natural for me. And obviously, the
Mm,
Catholic Church is a big mess, and it's got tons of problems. And I'm not
mm.
proselytizing or anything. But what do you have you delved into any of the mystic traditions inside, Christianity?
I think I realized I didn't fully answer one of your questions earlier, so I'm
Oh
going to
yeah,
answer it now.
bring it on.
Which is that like because there was my own like personal beliefs and all that has had it was a journey,
Mm-hmm.
and but there was a period of time when I was basically a mystic myself, and I think that was part of what kind of got my interest in a lot of this. I'm not now. I would just consider myself an atheist now. But like there was definitely a period where that was more my perspective. I didn't, it was even, I would say, because I was kind of like a progressive Christian for a little while, but then I was just kind of a mystic. I didn't really I didn't really align with any religion per se, but I still had like a, spiritual belief or belief in God kind of a thing. And yeah, and I think I feel like that was like the best experience that I had like spiritually. And I don't know. I think it's just made me really curious to learn about like different people's experiences and different people's ways of looking at the world and like what it is that they get out of their spiritual practice and yeah, and see if they're if even though I'm not interested in joining a religion per se, I'm always interested to see if there are like things that I can learn. And I feel like especially if there's such a big religion that just a huge number of people are following or have followed. I have to think that there's that there's some value in there that it wouldn't get that popular if not. And so I don't know.
You
That's
don't
my
you don't
perspective.
sound like a very bigoted, closed-minded atheist. So was there a day where you woke up and said, you know what, God's dead, doesn't exist, doesn't matter? Did something happen? What was that like?
No, and it wasn't that nothing happened. It was just that I just was no longer convinced by the kind of things I used to be convinced by.
Hmm.
Um,
You need some
different
chick tracts.
different explanations made more sense to me, and I just
Hmm.
kind of there was kind of a moment or two when I realized that I was like, yeah, I don't really believe in anything anymore.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
One of my favorite lines from Lebowski, oh, just ignore him, he's a nihilist. Oh, that must be exhausting. Do you know that line?
No, I don't know what you're
Uh,
referring to.
the Big Lebowski, where the nihilist is lying in the pool. That's all right.
Oh,
Do you
sorry.
not know Lebowski?
I guess not.
Oh
I'm
boy,
like
you got.
trying to make the connection in my
Oh yeah,
brain.
yeah.
I'm just not making
You've
it.
gotta do. You want to talk about world building? The L.A. that they built in The Big Lebowski is incredible with the
Is
cowboy.
that a film, I
Oh
assume?
yeah, you have to. Oh yeah,
How
you
do I
have to
know?
watch.
Okay.
You've got to watch A Big Lebowski. It's one of the most quotable films.
How does that spell? Lebowski?
Lebowski, Lebowski, Lebowski.
Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't mean to turn this into the hey Kevin talks about movies podcast.
Whatever.
Really, yeah, no, that's great. You've been so candid with your answers and everything, and
Mm,
when you were describing that turn
yeah.
into a more atheistic attitude, and then what I was hearing is a lot of empathy and a
Mm,
lot of curiosity, and I think those are things that probably are serving you well as a novelist because you have
mm,
to kind of be an actor to be a novelist. You have to put yourself in the mindset of the different characters. Are you writing the different characters' voices in terms of like, how is the novel written? Are you in their mind at some point, or how does it work?
yeah, this it's probably part of the reason why it's such a big book is because it's a very deep point of view style for this particular book. So you're very much in each of the characters' minds. And there are there are several characters, so you've got a lot of plot points to go through. And but yeah, it's very like very immersive in that way. And definitely like it I have thought about how the process for writing that kind of a style, the sort of deep POV style, it is. I mean, I'm not a professional actor by any stretch, but like it seems to me, someone who's worked with actors, that it's a very similar mindset that I have to go through. That like because yeah, like the kind of thinking is very similar to like an actor when you're about to get on the stage or get in front of a camera. You got to do all this backstory work, and you're thinking about your character's motivations, and and you're trying to think about like the deeper levels of what's motivating them and what is it that they want in this moment, and things like that. And yeah, I do all of that too. And so even if I'm not writing from a character's point of view, there's a lot that I know about them, about what their motivations are. And yeah, and it's very immersive, and it can be very hard to like start my day doing that and then pull out of it and then like, okay, now I got to do my normal work, and I'm like sitting there like trying not to think about the story I was just super immersed in just a
Yeah,
moment ago.
totally
Yeah,
relate to that. It's like
yeah.
an act of kind of going a little crazy, like controlled. It's like a controlled demolition of your psyche every day,
Huh,
and
I
then
like that.
it's like, oh, I got to make lunch, or I gotta
Yeah.
go, just date night with my my partner, and you have this like shell shocked look sometimes. I mean, I definitely lose my mind when I start writing a play. It's like you're
Mm.
hearing voices.
Hmm.
Like, hey, honey, I'm gonna go hear voices in the room and try to write them down.
Yeah.
When you just break it down, it's like totally crazy. I'm gonna go live in a different world. When you're writing your novel, I'm gonna go live in this fantasy world. Now,
Mhm.
but it is fun when you get to put the book out, and hopefully people enjoy it. Are you going to do a like a release event? What are you going to do? Are you going to do like an online thing? Are you going to do a reading? What's the plan?
I haven't announced that yet. I am planning something,
Uh,
yeah. I would like to do like a probably an Instagram live thing where I will read from the book, but I haven't officially put that together yet. So yeah, that's what
People
I'm
are
thinking.
doing lots of different things to try to hype
Mm,
their release and everything, and
yeah.
everybody will talk about content. It's like, well, yeah, you have content, but have you written an 800-page book? I don't think so. So it's like you have it now, and
Mhm.
what would be pie in the sky best case scenario for the book in your estimation? What would make you
Hmm.
deliriously happy for the world?
Well, the thing is that in terms of like marketing strategies and stuff like that, it's often very different when you're self-publishing as opposed to when you're like more traditional publishing. Because with traditional publishing, that like big book launch is super important, whereas with self-publishing, it's like having lots of books is super important. So I don't have like a lot of pressure on making the first one big, but I would like to make the second one a lot bigger, because that way, like before the second one comes out, um, I'm going to do a lot more pushing marketing for the first one. So then you have that, like, it's easier to do that when they're close together, right? Instead of like, here's a book, read it, and then great. Instead, it's like, here's a book. Oh, and the sequel's about to come out too.
Do
Um,
you have a target deadline? Have you started working on the second one? It sounds like you may have.
Yeah, I have some goals, but one of the things that I've learned from the first book is that I need to not put a set date until I know that I can meet that date. So I'm not going to announce my goal until I know that I can reach it. But yes, I have
Totally get
some
it.
private
Okay.
deadlines.
All right. Private deadlines. Those are often very, yeah, I like private deadlines sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So you have a website too, don't you? Do you want to plug that? Give
Yeah,
us your plugs again as we wind down here.
sure. I have my blog, which is briannadasilva.blog, and that's BriannadaSilva. And that's where I just do a lot of updates and stuff like that and write my opinions. And then I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. If you search my name, you'll find me there too. I'm curious underscore storyteller on Instagram, which is my handle there.
It's
So
a pretty good handle for you based on what I think this interview and the other one before. And then, of course, it's going to be at Neurasia.com. Is that live
yeah,
now?
it's not yet.
Okay.
And the pressure is on for me to get that ready because it's literally on the back cover. So
All right. Well, yeah, that'll be coming soon. What's the release date?
September 21st. Yeah.
2021.
Yeah.
All
21,
right.
9,
Yeah.
21, 21.
All right. I'm very excited for you.
Thank you.
NERASIA. Just winding down in the final few minutes.
Yeah.
We were talking about empathy
Mhm.
and what it had me think of, and this is a bit of a plug as well, but it's,
Yeah.
this podcast I've not grinded at quite as hard because I've turned my attention. I'm very happy to have this interview. I've turned my attention to Art of Darkness with my collaborator Brad Kelly, and the format of that show is that we don't interview. This is the interview show. We each once a month tackle the subject of a dead creator.
Hmm.
And so I've just done Marlon Brando. Prior to that, I had done Tennessee Williams. I'm going to be doing Sarah Kane next. Brad's done a whole bunch of wonderful episodes. Kafka. I did 3 hours on Stanley Kubrick.
Nice.
And we don't just play the hits either. We've done some more obscure ones. Junior Kimbrough. Brad did a Johnny Cash episode that's absolutely mental. And it's at artofdarkpod.com. But it's not just a pitch. Like the act of getting into the state of mind of these subjects, I found to be often overwhelming. Like when I started to do the Virginia Woolf episode, it really started to affect me
Hmm.
because, of course, we know how that ended for her. It didn't end well, and a lot of these creative people they've had tortured lives. I mean, Marlon Brando was a maniac, and some terrible things happened to his children. I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that I admire you for what you were saying earlier about that empathy, that desire. There's a certain amount of maturity I think that it
Mhm.
takes. Have you found like this practice of sort of like putting yourself into your character's shoes, reading about these other myths and these religions and all this? Has it helped you grow as a person? Has it affected your life in your day-to-day life? How has it affected it?
Totally. It's interesting. I thought about this a lot too because I don't know how much of this is from reading a lot of books and how much of it is from writing a lot of books, but I'm sure it's both. But there's this process that comes when you spend a lot of your day-to-day life putting yourself in other people's shoes, even though they're fictional people, they're made up people. You made them up or someone else made them up. And being able to, understand them and empathize with them and cheer them on and all this stuff, especially when these are people that are very different from you, right? Like that's one of the things I really enjoy about writing. I don't write self-insert fiction. I don't write about people who are just like me. I like to write about people who are very different from me and try to understand what makes them tick and what it would be like to be them. And but I've noticed that that experience like over my life has absolutely made it more, I wouldn't say it's not easier. It's like more, maybe it is easier, but to empathize with real people and to try to understand where real people are coming from. And I think it makes it more accessible. I think it's more like that. That's probably a better way to say it. It's like, it makes empathy more accessible and yeah. And you don't have to work as hard for it.
Yeah,
I guess it's easier,
I think
but yeah.
yeah. I think empathy is a muscle, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to work it out. And
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the reasons I'm really like art for art's sake. I'm that kind of
Yeah.
a guy. Like it's wonderful if you can end up being Kanye at Soldier Field doing your crazy performance art and selling millions of records and buying half the state of Wyoming for your ranch. That's amazing if you can do that. But on the other end of the spectrum, just somebody painting in their room, discovering something that, I mean, that objectively on its own has value. I'm a real deep believer in that.
I completely agree.
Yeah. And that is the hero's journey in a funny way, not to be too sappy, but we're definitely talking about the hero's journey here, and the work of making art is that journey. Winding down here at the very end, what is driving your characters in this story? What is the thing they have to accomplish in City of Reckoning, or else terrible things happen? What is it?
I think on the deepest level, each of them in this book is motivated by a desire for freedom, and that looks like different things for each of them. But that's one of the themes that is certainly tying them together.
Topical. I think freedom is we're right on the edge of something here, and we need to probably meditate a little more about it. So I think that's a good subject. Brianna da Silva, this has been a lot of fun. I'm Kevin Kautzman. Is there anything else you're dying to say here at the very end? Just go to briannadasilva.com.
.blog. Sorry, I lost
.blog. Sorry, Brianna da Silva .blog, and then we have Narasia.com. I'll put these links in the show notes, and let's do this again when you release the second one.
Sure.
And I want to hear how this goes as you release this. And I think everybody hearing this, you definitely support an artist who's putting out your first novel. What an incredible accomplishment! You must feel all warm and glowy inside. Is that how you feel?
Thank you. No, I really feel burnt out. I spent so much work on it, to be honest.
Well, I hope this has been a fun hour for you, and I also hope that you're able to get a break. Maybe just pump the brakes and go and watch The Big Lebowski and go and watch American Mystic.
Good advice.
Really, let me know what you think of both. If you watch those, send me an email or find me on the Bird website. I'm at Kevin Kautzman on the Bird website. You're on the Bird website too, right?
I am on the Bird website, yes.
What is it? Is it your name?
Yeah, it's my name, Brianna _da Silva. Yeah.
Brianna _da Silva. All right, Brianna, this has been a lot of fun. And this is the Get This Podcast, getthispodcast.com. I'm Kevin Kautzman. Take care. Yeah. Later. Congrats. Bye-bye.